So, and like the last panel, we haven't met, we haven't chatted, we have no idea what we're going to be talking about, really. We're just going to go with the flow and see how it goes. But one thing, hopefully, when you leave here, you'll leave with one thing that you didn't know before you arrived. That's got to be the goal, basically. So, without further ado, I think if you guys can introduce yourselves, and that would be great. Benson.
Hey guys, I'm Benson Udia. I'm Senior Marketing Manager at Parlophone Records, Warner Music Group. Yeah.
It's on now, yeah.
Is it on? It's on now.
I think, yeah, mine's fine. Should I go?
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I introduced myself earlier, but for anyone else who's come through now, I'm Nikki Camilleri. I am a music industry executive, and my experience has been across A&R and marketing.
Hi guys, I'm Cameron. I'm an A&R executive at Duetti.
Thanks. I love short intros. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate that. Gives me a lot of work with. So we're here to talk about music marketing. We've sort of listened to David saying that give up, basically, because AI is taking everything. We've heard about sort of Web3. We've heard about sort of different technologies. How the hell? What should I do? I'm an independent artist. Who wants to start? What should I do?
That is such a big question. I mean, the biggest thing I would say, which is echoing what I said earlier, is like build community. I think that's the most important thing in marketing. There's 101 different ways you can do that. It really depends on you and the type of people you want to reach out to and have in your community. But that is the most valuable thing in marketing, in my opinion.
I would say, just to add on to that as well, establish an identity, a clear identity that a community can align themselves with. Because I completely agree, community is super important. But in order to attract the right community, you need to have the right identity as well. So just be clear on who you are and who you want to be. And even if you're not necessarily that person in that moment, like, be intentional with what you do to ensure that you come across as the person that you're trying to attract, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. That's literally spot on. Like, community is one of the biggest areas of focus just within our label, for example, at Majors. It's important to kind of, curate your audience, but also speak to them in an authentic way. And I think both of what you guys are saying is spot on.
So, I mean, I wanted to pick up on the authenticity. I mean, when you're creating a persona and you're creating a community, how important is that?
Well, I think it's once you do that, those are the people and the audience that are going to stay with you potentially throughout your whole career. And I think having an audience that are invested and bought into whatever your product is, your artistry, that's going to be the hallmark of your career. So it's essential, particularly at the beginning of any sort of artist career. I think it's key to have that foundation.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it's really easy for someone to say, like, be authentic, and it's different to really know how to do that. I think that's the hardest thing, because there's loads of different ways you can do it again. But I think the biggest thing is, like, it's quite tempting, like, if we're looking at it from a social media perspective, or if we're looking at it from, like, your music perspective and your branding and all of that. But it's quite tempting to jump on trends or see what's working and try and mimic that, or try and align with it as much as possible. But the reality, I was just talking to a couple of you before this, and the same thing that kind of came up is, like, how long it takes to actually build your product, essentially, and yourself as a brand, because you are the brand, and to get to the point where you're really kind of reaping the benefits of all the work you've done. So if you have to keep it up that long, it's really hard to pretend not to be yourself, or to keep up every different trend every year, versus just starting with what you really want to do and finding the fans who align with that. So I think that's the biggest sort of reason why I think a lot of us will say be authentic and build stuff around you and find people who align with that. Because if you want to be and make music, in a certain way, there are other people there, is what's most likely.
And yeah, just to add on to the whole authenticity conversation, I feel like when trying to be authentic, I think the most important thing that an artist can ask themselves at the start is the why. Like, why do you make music? Why do you why do you want people to listen to your music and what do you want them to take from it? And based on the answers to those questions, I feel like you'll be able to figure out a way to be authentic to yourself.
Yeah, I love that actually, and the why bit, you know, because I want to make money, I want to be famous, you know, sort of, and then I'll fake authenticity to make that happen. You know, a lot of brands do that, of course, you know, and not just musicians and artists. You know, you see a lot of brands get things wrong where they try to be the really boomers like me, and they try to be sort of, you know, sort of TikTokers. So in terms of the, you know, but we've heard a lot about build a community, you know, and I think of it as I'm a technology entrepreneur, so I look at it as a sort of pipeline, you know, as a funnel, you know, so how do you start that, you know, process? Because I talk to a lot of people, I've been talking to a few tonight saying, look, I've made some great music, but I think I need to hire somebody to build my community for me in order to get my music out. You know, it seems to be, I want to outsource that part of it because I want to just be creative. What's your take on that?
I'd say before you even get to that point, it's kind of like what we've all been saying, is that you need to establish who you are as an artist and what you're trying to do, what you're trying to say, and then I think that will kind of guide where your music kind of sits within the world it is. Because I think it's important for you to say, okay, I'm an artist that makes this type of music, and I think I would appeal to these types of people, and I see my music being streamed or, you know, accessed in a certain place and area. So like, I think once you establish that, it's then finding the pieces around that, whether it's, you know, you go to I don't know, a press person, for example, or you go to a digital expert, or you go to, you know, someone who's got skills in a particular area. You use someone who's going to play live a lot. You know, you can is your audience going to be built off of a certain pastiche in a certain place? And I think once you identify that, you'll kind of like find the steps into like what you need going forward. So I think it starts at the core, like where the artist is and what they feel they need. But that's my opinion.
And is that purely down to the artist, or do they need help from management to do that? Because I mean, you're in the studio, you're making some music, or not in the studio, you're just rehearsal rooms or whatever.
Yeah.
Is it the artist's job to do that?
Not necessarily. I think it depends. Every artist is different, and their process is different. Sometimes it is with a team. You could be, you know, an artist has their own thoughts and ways of wanting to do something, and then sort of expands on that. But I guess the team and the management will kind of be formed upon that anyway. So yeah, I think it's a bit of both. It just depends.
Yeah, and maybe like a practical thing on that. One thing I've always kind of pushed artists I've worked with to do is like, obviously your product, I keep calling it a product and I don't even like that I call it that, but your music, your art, like make that really, really, really good, and then look at where it kind of sits in the broader landscape of music. And don't look at, like, if you're a singer-songwriter, don't look at Ed Sheeran, because he's just way above where you're at if you're just starting out and he has a full team and a huge budget. But try and look at people who have maybe 50,000 monthly Spotify listeners. For someone just starting out, even that's a lot. And look at what they're doing, what they're posting, where they're gigging, how they speak to their fans, and look at a bunch of different people, because some just won't resonate with you, some will, but where are their communities? Because they have these small communities that want to listen to a grassroots person. And that's quite a practical way you can do it. You can literally go on Spotify and look at fans also like, that little section at the bottom, and find artists that are small, that are similar to some of the people you really like and you're trying to be in the same space as. But that's one practical thing where you can go and try and find where your fans possibly are, so you can go and build that community.
For sure. I mean, to sort of piggyback off the point that was just made, if you prioritize the music first and foremost, you might find that if you put your music out consistently and the music is good and the music is valued within the marketplace will sort of determine where you sit organically. And then through that, you can build a community that way. So I completely agree. Prioritize the music first and foremost, and then everything else will be a lot easier for you.
And is that because the scale of digital music and the platforms is like every train has a passenger? You're going to find your audience.
I mean, 1,000%. Of course, it's genre by genre, but generally within the most popular genres of music, it's oversaturated, it's overinflated. it's hard to stand out on the best of days. So I feel as though good music at the end of the day, it sounds like a cliche, and I'm sure a lot of people here make great music and they feel as though they're not being heard. But if you consistently put out good music with a good marketing, good packaging, and you're consistent with it, eventually you'll be heard by someone. So yeah.
Love that positivity. I mean, from an A&R perspective, you know, when you look at, is there a hierarchy of sort of, you know, music, quality of music, community, views, streams, you know, is there a hierarchy there?
I would say from my experience, I can't speak for all A&Rs, but from my own personal experience, the first thing I prioritize is whether the music resonates with me. And then after that, I prioritize whether the branding and the image resonates with me. And then after that, I look at the numbers.
100%. I think it's a balance between the two. Like, you can't ignore the numbers, but you can put it into context as well. Because if, like, it's someone who hasn't released their debut, there's no numbers there. Or they've released one track, so it's going to be, you know, a couple numbers there, but not much you can look at. But you need to look at both sides. It's like, is the music good? But there's other qualitative stuff as well, like, who's their team? Do they have a team? How do they work? How quickly can they make music? And loads of other different, like, I've looked at so many different aspects when signing people, and you kind of, some things are weighted a little bit more than others. But I mean, one thing you can't ignore is, like, is the music good at the end of the day? Because, yeah, you otherwise end up with, again, I referenced it earlier, but signing a TikTok artist who can't pull down 5 people to any of their gigs, which is not what you want from even just from a pure revenue standpoint, let alone from an artistic standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with both what you guys have said. I think, I think all of the metrics in situ have to be considered. And I think it has to resonate with the person. Everyone's A&R process is different, I guess. But you know, you gotta like the music, but you might like the way it's packaged, for example, or you might like something else about the ecosystem of it. So I think it's just, it's kind of case by case basis.
I think something that resonated with me, I was chatting to someone about whether they would sign them as a management, and actually it was about work ethic.
Yeah.
You know, are
Do
they
you want
committed to this? Are they all in? Because I'm not going to go all in if they're not all in.
Yeah, exactly. Especially not for 20%. If you're a manager, it's like they should be putting 80% of the effort and you should be putting 20. And I think sometimes people flip that. It's like a manager's not going to make you. They're there to embellish sort of what you're doing.
I want to sort of change it up a little bit in terms of your take on, you know, where the industry's going from an independent label perspective to majors, you know, in light of, well, everything that's happening, you know, on the sort of planet right now. I mean, you know, how does a major operate going forward, when tools have been given or created to make independent artists be able to sort of do things, you know, on their own?
I'll probably have to.
That was very aimed at you, Benson.
I would say I think the role of majors is something that's continually, like, it's evolving. There isn't, you know, it's different for different artists, but I think what majors are really great at is, like, if there's a particular area, majors are really good at, like, enhancing that. So if you've got, I don't know, if you've got like a great merch business, there's like a whole department and facility that can kind of amplify that. Like, we can kind of make sure an artist gets what they need and sort of then amplify the areas that are successful to them or potentially successful. There's no guarantee of, like, how that's going to end up, but I think the role is, like, something that's continually changing. I think it's different for different artists. You know, you could have an artist that's, you know, doing really well in the touring space, and maybe you need, you know, tour support or something, or help in that space. It's just picking the areas that kind of work for each artist. I think that's, you know, a good future way of, like, how things will kind of develop. Just because the services are so vast, there's so many things and ways you can work with a major record label. It isn't sort of a one size fits all. Yeah,
I think that's really fair. Like, I personally don't think major labels are going anywhere. I just think before it was what all artists kind of looked at as their North Star. You just wanted to get signed because that was kind of all you kind of knew to do. But it's just like people have just presented loads of other options now. And for some artists, signing to a major label is the right thing to do. And for others, it's not. Major labels obviously have a lot of resource. You might be the type of artist who would really flourish there. You might be the type of artist who, it's just not for you and you can make as much money. You might not be as big of a household name, or you might be. So it really depends. It's kind of just become more tailored and like there's more options there depending on what you want to do and what your goals are versus just like one straight path. And if you don't make it, sorry, like there's no other option. So for me, I think I have quite a positive outlook on it. I just think there's more options for different types of artists.
Benson, forgive me for what I'm about to say about major labels. I feel like the most advantageous way for independent artists to look at major labels is like a glorified bank. I feel as though the value that comes from a major label in 2024 for most independent artists is in magnifying what they're already doing, taking it to a bigger scale that it's already on. I feel as though if you look at a major label in 2024 as an independent artist and think this major label is going to change my life and change my entire situation, then you're already at a disadvantage. I feel as though you should really prioritize building as much as you can on your own so that you can maximize your leverage. And then once you do that, you can negotiate a deal as favorable as possible with a major label and then maximize the resources that they have. That's just my opinion.
I agree. What perspective were you asking that question from? Like an artist who's not it's more you. Like, yeah, because I guess to your point, you could be an artist who has built up enough of an audience and you're now looking at the options of signing to a major record label, if that makes sense for you and where you are in your career. Or are you saying from the perspective of an artist who's absolutely brand new, deciding to sign to a major record label, is that the right thing to do? Isn't it? I'm more asking that question to you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah,
because the perspective is kind of key.
Yeah, right? No, totally. I mean, I think it's sort of it's conversations about sort of I need to get ready to get signed. I need to get ready to get signed, and it's sort of like ready. How? What do you mean ready to get signed? It's sort of and then signed by what, and what are you expecting from it, and all the other elements of it. But it's as if the end of the journey is the signing, not the beginning of the journey. It's sort of, it's like, yes, let's have a party. I've signed. There's so many bands that have, that have done that. Had the sign-in party, smashed the champagne, and then nothing gets released.
Yeah, it's definitely not the end goal. I think it's almost like it's a partnership, right? I guess it's you've got a partnership of expertise, whether that's financially or the expertise that you may need. It's just if it's right for you.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, it depends as well. Like, we're kind of also just lumping major labels into one big box here. But I think one really important thing is like actually meeting the teams who you're going to work with. Because even just year to year, if people move around, like I think what makes a label is the people there. And it could be, like, I don't know, Warner Records, Parlophone, a Universal label. It could be anyone, but it's really about who sat there. Do they really care about your project and get it? And like, why would you want to work with them? Or are you better off being independent and building your own team from freelancers or different companies? So for me, the argument's almost not like major label or not. It's just like, what's right for you? What are they giving you? But I very much agree with the point of like, build as much leverage as you can, because you're going to need to build it up. Even if you do get signed, like that's the beginning of the really hard work.
I like that, because it's sort of, sorry, going back to your point, it was like, again, the analogy of the business world is like, am I ready to go to the bank to get an overdraft for my business? Have I actually got the business ready to take that debt on? And because I need that money to put fuel on the fire. I don't need it to start the bloody business. I need it to put fuel on the fire, and that sort of going back to the resources of the majors to do that.
And yeah, I just want to make that clear. I'm not in any way saying that you should be anti-labels in any way. I'm just saying build up as much leverage as you possibly can before you entertain labels, because the more leverage you have, the more favorable the deal will be for you. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that, because I think for years people have glorified it, again, saying it's the end goal. Once you're signed, you're set and you're all good. And it's like, no, it's actually not the case. So it's like we almost need to overcorrect a little bit. And I think there's been a big overcorrection into everyone saying like, oh, to hell with labels. But it's like they they serve a purpose. It just depends if it's right for you, really.
One thing I'm seeing as well is this, increased importance of fan data, right across the labels. This ability for the artists to know who their fans are, and for the labels to know who the fans of those artists are for all sorts of other reasons, which can create new revenue streams, where that data can be leveraged to create a new revenue stream for everybody. And I think it's just getting that sort of mentality as an artist to understand the value of that fan community that you've got, and actually have the ability as well to own that data and bring it with you off platform. I think that has to be the future, where it's your art, your fans, your data, take them with you. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's again like an evolving part of the ecosystem in terms of like releasing, and we spoke about sort of community and developing that world. That speaks to that. It's like, how can you create a tailored experience for someone who is enjoying or consuming your music in some way? Is it is there other things you can offer that kind of keep people in and interested in what you're doing? So yeah, I think it's just part of how data is now being, how we're getting data and how we're using it.
Yeah, I think owning your data is like the biggest takeaway from all of this. It's like, we saw like in America, there was talk about like, are they going to keep TikTok, or is there going to be some ban of it or something like that? And it's like, if you built uploads on TikTok, it disappeared tomorrow. You've lost your entire fan base if you don't own your data, which is why everyone's now suddenly talking about that all of the time. So it's like, own their contact details essentially is what you want. We all know as consumers we hate giving away our emails and our numbers. We find it very annoying, but if you can find a way to make that as smooth as possible, which a lot of artists are doing, that is again your biggest leverage. And if you do sign to a label or any company, and they're running your newsletter or running campaigns for you and collecting that information, you are legally entitled to it. There's a big manager from Tap Management came out the other day saying they literally went to their big major labels and said, give us all the data, because actually we own it. For years, the labels have been owning it because that's just what everyone did. But you can actually go and ask for all of these emails and everything for your fans. And it is the artist and the manager who should really have that information, because it is what's most valuable at the moment to directly reach out to people. If labels went somewhere, the social media platforms disappeared tomorrow, which they're unlikely to, but you know what I mean? You need to own it.
Well, saying that, X's license terms are quite simple. They own every account and they just give you the right to use it. And if they want to remove that account, they can, and enough about him.
Yeah, and it sounds crazy, but it could happen.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
it. A social media platform could disappear.
Yeah, please, if you're an artist with music up on DSPs, please pay attention to your Spotify for artists. Pay attention to the demographic of your audience. Pay attention to the source of your streams as well, because please, best believe, anyone that's courting you, anyone that's engaging in potential conversations with you is also paying attention to that data as well. And if they can get it, they're going to use it to inform decisions around you. So first and foremost, make sure that you have access to that information and that you're actively checking it, because it's important.
Yeah, great point. I'm sort of running out of questions, really. So is there anything that you guys want to sort of highlight or point out that I'm not educated enough to ask about?
Maybe to your point as well, I think Spotify for Artists is a great resource. There's obviously Amazon for Artists, Apple Music for Artists, there's loads of data platforms. But you can use that data yourself as well, for so many things, where should you route a tour is the classic one that people kind of reference by seeing where your fans are, geographically. But there's so much else, even from basic things like looking at how much revenue have I actually made in the last year, annually off streaming, because if you're going to distribution platforms, the rough numbers they look at is how much you made in the last year in terms of how much they can reasonably advance you. So again, that manages expectations. If you're cool, I made $5,000 and I'm there asking for £1 million, it's not going to happen, because that's what they literally look at your data. So you can start looking at, okay, who can I approach? What realistically can I achieve here? And just finding those insights from the data. And it's really simple stuff you can do yourself. You don't need to like data. I imagine a lot of people don't, when you're in a creative field, but it is important to kind of understand that stuff.
Yeah, and to the revenue point, if you end up signing a deal, make sure that you have an audit clause in your contract that allows you to check how much revenue you're generating for the company on a monthly basis in terms of royalty statements, because that's super important as well. If you don't have that audit clause in your contract, then you won't be able to check. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's wild that anyone wouldn't let you check. That's crazy. I think I would go as far as to say do not sign with that company if they're not letting you look at your finance data.
I literally had this situation with an artist I'm working with yesterday. He's legally not allowed to check how much money he's generating because there's no audit clause.
I'm going to ask you after who that is and avoid them. Jesus, that's
Crazy.
None of your business. As he drives off in the Rolls Royce.
I wish.
I mean, in terms of, well, that's an interesting one. I will move to tech a little bit, actually. You know, when you look at some of the tech models, some of the, you know, Web3 models, some of those things that are happening right now, is that having any impact? Is that sort of things that are now being brought up in conversations, you know, or is it still it's like a sideshow for nerds?
It comes up more and more. Like with anything, like we just have to be aware of the ever-changing landscape of music consumption and how that affects the audience. But yeah, I think I think with so many options for tech, kind of even for artists and musicians, I think it's key to just find the ones that you resonate with the most and optimize them as best as you can, and then keep aware of everything else. But like, it's going to be very difficult to be across everything and every emerging trend. It's just whatever's right for you as an artist, like what speaks the best to your audience or whatever it may be. It's just focusing on that, I think, is key. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I feel like it's coming up a lot more. I almost expect it to come up even more in, I guess, the worlds that we kind of sit in. But I mean, definitely music tech platforms and like the whole independent scene and like artist services tools. Like there's so many popping up and more artists are using them. Like AI is coming up, but almost more from like an internal standpoint of like how companies can like make what they're doing more efficient, and people talk about it a lot, but there hasn't been as much adoption of it as I think gets sensationalized in a lot of like outward media and stuff like that. I think right now everyone's really looking at it because it's such an important area. 100% you need to be aware of it, but it's not like part of people's day to day, I guess I would say yet. But you need to be aware because I mean, at some point it will be. But yeah, that's kind of my experience with it so far.
I would say, at least from the industry side, there's like a clear distinction between the US's approach to tech and AI and the UK's approach. So I work currently for an American company, and within the American market, tech and AI is already being utilized, whereas in the UK, it's still relatively a new thing. So it sort of depends on which market you're talking about.
I think also, I mean, AI is going to have a massive impact on, we were just talking then about contracts, just the ability for an artist just to ask ChatGPT, you know, give me a fair contract, you know, is this a fair contract? How does this compare? You know, just sort of the reduction in legal fees and sort of, and consultancy fees that you're going to need. You know, we certainly see it in the tech industry where again, the use of lawyers have, dropped massively. You know, development costs have dropped massively, you know, and it's going to have an impact on the business of music. You know, if not music, obviously it'll have an impact on music as well, but the business of music, which has got to be great for artists, really.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it will mean you have to spend less, similarly to what you're finding, and you can get more information and more tailored information, which I think is kind of hard to get now just from Googling stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think in the long run, it's definitely a good thing.
Any questions from anybody?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Benson, you work for Parlophone, you said, right? I wondered, on the topic of like authenticity and trying to create community, how much of an influence do the major labels have on the authenticity we see of artists at the very top? Like, is it you know, is Sabrina Carpenter really in control of her TikTok, or is it like, is there influence from you guys?
I got the mic. Yeah, I think it's case by case. It's hard to say for a Sabrina, for example. I don't know what her team setup is, but in terms of the influence of it, like, of course we have ideas, we have suggestions, we work with the team, we work collaboratively, right? Everybody's success is kind of in unison, so there isn't a it's not like a sort of like we're telling you to do this and you must do this. It's kind of like a collaborative process in my experience anyway. So it's between artist management and any other intermediaries involved with the label. So yeah, I wouldn't say that we alter any.
It's not like a strategy. Sorry, there's not like a strategy that's been thought out months in advance that then the artist is then implementing. They are just like typically being themselves day to day, you reckon?
Oh, well, it sort of depends. Like if we've got a rollout for a single campaign, you know, whether going to album, EP, single, yes, there are, you know, cornerstones of what we want, what we will agree with an artist in terms of like what the comms might be, how the creative might look, and all of those kind of components as well. But there, you know, generally the use of socials for an artist might be kind of ad hoc as well. There's bits in between that are kind of more spontaneous. It really just depends on the artist. You know, I couldn't say there's a blanket way of doing things for every artist, but within the campaigns we do work, there is a meticulous level of like strategy and planning of like, you know, we want to release here for this reason. We've got this coming. Oh, there's a live show. There's a tour. We're going to plan around that. We sort of build the campaign around sort of key cornerstones and moments with the artists as well. So, yeah, my answer to your question is there's no one size fits all.
Hiya. This question is for everybody. I wanted to ask about the future of music marketing, going in, you know, forward into the next couple of years. Like on social media, obviously things like there's talks of TikTok, like you said, Nikki, there's talks of TikTok getting banned. Potentially, we don't know. You know, Instagram just released that new feature of that you can reset your algorithm now, like bring it back to like the way it's, you know, the way it originally is supposed to be. I guess as an independent artist, what would you say, you know, how would it go moving forward? Would social media still be such a powerful tool? Will it get any more or less powerful? Will it become, or will it, you know, eventually go back to, you know, emailing people, networking? What's the important, like what should be the focus going forward, I think?
I'm going to give you a very honest answer, and you might be unsatisfied with the answer that I give you, but I don't know. But
I had a feeling, to be fair, but I'm curious about opinions.
I feel like as an independent artist, that's a super positive thing, because there's so much uncertainty within the music industry currently, and that is when I feel as though independent artists thrive the most, because no one knows what they're doing, and the only things that really cut through are innovation and creativity. So if I was you, I would prioritize innovation and creativity, because through that, you'd be able to cut through and create opportunities that no one can foresee at the moment. To be honest with you, the music industry right now is in a transitional period, at least from my perspective. Maybe other people up here will say otherwise. But so a lot of people are really trying to figure out what is the next thing, what that's going to look like, and how to maximize that. But within that uncertainty, there's scope for independent artists to do things that no one can foresee.
Sorry. Hi. I can address the technical aspect of that, without a doubt. Right. It's insane that we call social networks these silos. It's not social, it's siloed. It's absolutely crazy. We're entering a world, like I say, of these AI agents, right, where these silos are just going to be broken down, and you'll be able to just talk to whoever you want. You'll be able to spin up a version of Facebook on your own landing page. You'll be able to sort of recreate all of these different sort of platforms. So this idea of siloed social media accounts is for the birds. And you can see that with the development that's going on, you know, with the big big technology companies right now, but which means, as an artist, focus on your craft, create some great music, build a community, because the worry about whether it's this social network you need to be on or that social network you need to be on or blah, 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 your music will get discovered, and you won't need to be on one or the other or the other. That's the benefit, if there's one positive of AI, it's going to be your own personal AI agent discovering music for you anywhere, at any time, wherever it is, and enabling you to talk to your audience wherever they are at any time, and that's the very near future.
I would say I think we're going to enter a phase where there's like a lot more sort of like homogenized audiences that artists can kind of live off an ecosystem from. So like whether you're making music for you're making music and it's indexing with a particular group, there'll be people that really like that, and some music may never necessarily become mainstream, and that sort of term and way of thinking might end up becoming something completely new, because there's obviously artists that are like really big in the spaces that they operate in, but they're not necessarily considered mainstream. We could do a poll on some artists that both of us listen to, right, and that we love, but not everybody knows. But then they're also doing really well from like a commercial standpoint in their respective areas. So I think there's going to be more of that kind of homogenized sort of like, okay, we're really behind this type of artist, but it may never necessarily get to what we consider superstar level. And I think we'll end up redefining what that is. I think it'll just be like loads of different artists that are actually able to be successful in the respective worlds they operate in. And that will come from audience and fan base and kind of curating a real indebted group of people that really like your music.
Yeah, and then, I mean, just to echo from me, I think it's about, not thinking like other people have said about the social media platform, but the end goal, which is, again, building community, finding that community and being able to communicate with them. And social media is purely like a tool to do that. Like we didn't have TikTok a couple of years back. There'll probably be something else in the next 5 years. And you'll just have to move to whatever tool it is to be able to communicate with people. But again, that's why it's important to own your fan data so you can go direct regardless of what other tools sort of pop up.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so going back to that, you're saying it's going to be more homogenized, and talking about communities. Say if you have built, your own community over the years, you're of a specific genre, you're then wanting to kind of, say, move in a slightly direction, maybe go more mainstream because your genre isn't mainstream. It'd be good to know this from independent and a major label point of view. Particularly with demographics, if you have a particular demographic for your music, how easy is it to expand to different demographics, do that crossover? Do you have to start again and build that community again, or is there ways of...
That's a really interesting point. I think it's a $1 million question, right? It's like, how do you, what do you need to do to kind of grow your fan base beyond where you are? And that could be a change in sound, for example. It might not be the right thing to do. It could be a change in resource. So maybe some independent artists end up then signing with major record labels and go, okay, cool, we need to break internationally. So therefore you have the resources. Let's take what we're doing and export that around the world. That could be one way of doing it. I think it honestly is case by case in my experience, but I think some artists may be happy just being in a more kind of closed off audience and actually being successful off the back of that. Because you're seeing loads of artists that are kind of coming up in that kind of space. And there's actually now, you got artists that are now sort of like, not necessarily superstar level, but they're actually living pretty decent lives and making good money off of music. So I think that opens up a whole new space and world. And I think that's something that, from a tech point, that's what streaming's kind of benefit for, but brought to the audience. So there's now more ways of looking at kind of world of music beyond that. Just, you have to be a superstar kind of thing.
I think it's more just reaching out to a wider audience. If you've built that specific audience in a particular demographic, how do you get out, to a wider audience, to get more people listening to you without kind of starting again from that community again?
I'd say then it is marketing. It's the reach of what you can do, whether that's whatever technique you want to use. For example, it could be ads on TV or paid ads on socials, wherever it reaches the type of audience profiles that you want to now target. So you can be clever with things like that. And then, yeah, as it could be music related as well. You could be bringing in features from different artists and so forth, like to start to reach a different demographic. So I think it's totally possible. It just is dependent on the situation, artist, and what the actual goal is. Like, if you know, how big do you want to be? Because we could talk about size of artists. You could talk Taylor Swift big, or you could talk, you know, I don't know, another sort of artist, mid-level artist, sort of big. So it really depends where you're coming from.
And actually, off the back of that, just another question I've thought of. What's your opinion on doing support tours, no matter how small or big? Does that open up to a different demographic? And how do big artists choose who they would have as a support?
I've seen it with some artists that we've worked with before. Like, they've gone on support tours and ended up gaining a new audience and getting in front of an audience that was perhaps bigger than theirs. So they've now stuck along and become fans of that said artist. So it's totally beneficial. In terms of the selection process, we've had it with an artist where a huge US superstar was just a fan of the music and wanted the artist on tour. And that was great because it was perfect for where they were in their career and where they were going. So sometimes it is agent influence, label influence, but I guess it depends on the scale of the artist. The bigger they are, often there's more kind of conversation of, I want this person on tour, and it makes sense for that said artist to go on. But I think it's really valuable. I think it's a great marketing tool. I think being in front of artists performing, like being in front of audiences performing live, is like possibly one of the best marketing tools you could ever have. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks very much. And I've learned a lot anyway, being as I came in here not knowing very much at all. So I appreciate that. I think one thing what I like doing about panels in not speaking beforehand is sort of that it becomes an educational process as opposed to a prescribed, boring sort of process. So yeah, I hope, as I said, the objective is that you'll have one thing to take away that you didn't know before you came. So that's and not just a can of beer. So that's the objective. A couple of things that I want to say really is that our artist fund, our grant that we're putting out, is to help you get your community, is to help you find your audience. That's what it's for. You know, everything that we do at Amplify World is supposed to be incremental. It's not extractive. It doesn't take away your royalties, doesn't take away publishing, doesn't get involved in your live, doesn't do everything else. It's how can we experiment with technology to give you incremental revenue so that it enables more artists to earn a living wage. That's our whole sort of purpose, and that's what the grant is there for. So yeah, thanks for everyone that's applied, and we'll be in touch soon. There are some T-shirts out there if anybody wants some. They're very badly wrinkled. I blame my son for that, who's at the back of the room. But they're there, and like I say, we'll be mingling for the next sort of I think we've got the room for an hour, so there's some drinks. Ian wants to say something. NFT. Oh yeah, we do have some NFTs, and we're going to be dropping them randomly to email addresses as they come, because part of our economic model for Amplify World is the tokenizing. It's a horrible term, tokenizing behavior. So it's incentivizing behavior to encourage people to do things on behalf of artists. So over and above what they'd be doing anyway. So all of that needs, when you've got a global economy, you need a token to do that, because you can't pay somebody like 2 cents by sending them 2 cents, via their bank account. It doesn't sort of work. So yeah, anyway, the NFTs, if you get one of those, it qualifies you for our token, which we're launching soon. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you with that. This is not about that. This is about the Artist Fund. It's about creators, and it's about helping you grow your career. Thanks for the panel. Thanks very much, and thank you. Good night.